What is the connection between FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, and TikTok? Join Richard Ebeling and me in this week's Libertarian Angle as we examine that question. Hi, I'm Jacob Hornberger, president of the Future of Freedom Foundation, and this is this week's Libertarian Angle, the show that brings you the principled, uncompromising case for the libertarian philosophy and has for many years now. I'm joined by my co-host, Richard Ebeling, professor of economics at the Citadel, former president of the Foundation for Economic Education, former Ludwig von Mises professor at Hillsdale College, and former professor at the University of Dallas, where we first met many years ago, Richard.
Great to be here with our viewers and listeners. The way you phrase that, it sounds like I can't hold down a job. Former. No, I've had a good time at each of these places, and enjoyed teaching in places, being the president of FI, all for advancing these type of consistent and principled arguments for liberty that we try to do here every week.
Yeah, we've been doing it a long time. So, Richard, there's a new law that's been enacted with respect to TikTok, the
Yes.
Chinese internet page where people put their videos and other things, and the national security state here in the United States, and the Congress, the executive branch, they all perceive this as some kind of threat to national security because they say that the Chinese regime is gathering data on Americans. And I don't know exactly where the threat is, but maybe the China is planning to invade the United States and would like to have everybody's personal information, where they're living and so forth, as to where to go knock on their doors to confiscate their weapons or drugs or whatever during the invasion. But the irony of this was that at about the same time that Congress was enacting this law, they were deliberating on whether to extend the FISA legislation, the Foreign Intelligence, Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, which enables the U.S. government to gather data on the American people, oftentimes illegally, that through warrantless searches. And in fact, what they ended up doing is they not only extended the FISA legislation, they actually expanded it to provide for a greater array of internet service providers to be required to turn over information, secret information on their customers without a warrant. So here you have, Richard, two governments, the US government gathering data on the American people, and the Chinese government, presumably, I think they deny it, gathering data on the American people. But in one instance, it's considered to be a threat to national security and to the American people. But in the other instance, it's considered to be a very good thing to keep us safe. What do you think about all this nonsense, Richard?
You see, you're missing a vital point here, Jacob. It's that the US government wants to have the monopoly on surveilling American people. How dare we have any competitors to know what our citizens are doing? We're the only ones to know at a micro level of what every American is doing at every moment of the time that they're using their phone for something. Anyone else can't know this. Now, to show that this goes the both ways, the Chinese have banned several social network sites, American social network sites in China. One of them being Signal. Signal is a very effective social media site in the sense that it has a higher degree of security. So people can talk more honestly about things with each other. I'm on Signal. I admit that there are certain things I converse with those people that is better to be kept out of the public eye, like the truth about you. I try to hide it in public. What is the real Jacob Hornberger like? So but the problem is that these more secure sites, particularly in an authoritarian country like China, was not agreeable to the government, right? What could the Chinese people be saying to each other that the government doesn't know about? So it's just that every government wants to do this, and they want a monopoly on controlling the thoughts and the communications by and between their own citizens. But there's another dimension to this TikTok thing, without in any way diminishing the government intrusive point that you're bringing out. There's the old adage that always has a dimension in everything. Follow the money. If TikTok is banned, who benefits? TikTok right now, at least what I was reading recently in an article in the Wall Street Journal, 140 participants with TikTok, subscribers. The average TikTok subscriber spends 90 minutes a day on TikTok, either adding something or watching something or communicating something. They have among the largest percentage of youth participants and subscribers. This is a huge market in the United States. And what was their revenue last year? $6.6 billion. That's a B. Now let's suppose that TikTok gets banned, and all of these people who use TikTok have to now find a way of finding out things, sharing things, hearing things, knowing things from some other networks. Well, where will they turn to? Their American competitors. In other words, this is a way, I know it's so crass when we're talking about national security, but here's a typical case of anti-competition legislation that will assist domestic rivals who will be able to pick up the pieces of the lost market because TikTok will have been banned. And do you think this hasn't entered the mind of Snapchat or YouTube or Facebook or any of the others? You better believe that each of them are salivating. TikTok will be gone. How do we get part of those 1.4 million subscribers with their 90 minutes a day of more time on our sites? And think of the extra advertising revenue we're going to make, because the more subscribers and users, the more we can charge the subscribers. I mean, this is just the game. Now, this is not to downplay your social security, your national security point, because this is crucial in the questions of liberty in the relationship between the citizenry and the government. But the government is used to benefit some at the expense of others. And if TikTok is banned, there are economic gains for what will then be more privileged domestic competitors.
Richard, you are so cynical. I just don't understand how you became so cynical.
You know, it started when I became an economist.
Oh.
Follow the money, who gains, what's the cost, and who's gaining the benefit.
Well, actually, they're giving the Chinese company that owns TikTok the option of shutting down or selling it to someone else, like an American company.
And they have a year to do this. They have a year to do this.
But Richard, it seems to me that if a person signs up on TikTok, he knows that this data is going to this company and that this is a Chinese company, or at least he should knows, or he doesn't care. Why shouldn't Americans be free to do that? If a foreign regime or a foreign company offers a service and says, okay, this is our service, we're going to be posting your videos and stuff, but we're going to acquire access to your information that you give us, why shouldn't people be free to make that exchange? Why should they be protected and be kept safe by their own government? Oh no, it would be a very bad thing for the Chinese to know where you live in case of an invasion. I mean, I kind of feel sometimes like we're back in the Cold War. Oh, the Chinese are coming, the Chinese are coming, the Russians are coming, the Russians are coming. And it's that same mindset that we need to protect you from this, from the Reds that are coming to get us. Now, over on the FISA thing, what I find interesting there is how they go through all these hoops that, oh, well, if you communicate with a foreigner, that allows the government to now monitor your communications. But from what I can tell, it's not real clear whether they can only monitor your communications with the foreigner or whether they can monitor any of your communications. It seems to me that once they establish that you're a potential threat to national security because you're talking with a Russian citizen or something like that, that they're probably going to monitor all of your communications. But there's the rub, Richard. As far as I'm concerned, U.S. officials are monitoring everything. This FISA stuff is it's all just window dressing, because they know that if they monitor everybody illegally, no warrants, nothing's going to happen to them. I mean, think about it. If they have the technological capability of monitoring everybody and the huge databases that can hold all this information, why wouldn't they do it? It's not like if they get caught, they're going to prison, or they're going to get fined, or even they're going to get fired. And Snowden is the classic example of this, Edward Snowden. That Snowden reveals that these people were doing illegal surveillance. And everybody agrees it was illegal. Okay, now who got fired? Who got fined? Who lost their jobs? Only Snowden did, for revealing their dark secrets. I mean, that's why he's exiled into Russia, because he's facing criminal charges for having revealed the illegality. So they know, Richard, that they can surveil everybody. They can keep track of everybody's telephone calls and their emails and their internet visits. And it doesn't matter, because even if they do get caught, which is very unlikely, because there's not very many Edward Snowdens in the world that are going to go reveal the dark secrets of the national security state, nothing's going to happen to them. And so if Americans finally have to come to the realization that if they want a genuinely free society where their privacy is truly private and it's no business of the government, there's only one thing that can be done. And I've been saying this for many years now, is that you have to just dismantle the whole national security state, the whole apparatus, and restore a limited government republic. Because as long as you have a Pentagon, CIA, and NSA, they're going to surveil. That's just standard. And they do it many times out of their own good intentions. Oh, we're keeping America safe. And so you have to get to the root of the problem, and that's dismantle the apparatus that has the technological means, presumably, of doing all this surveillance. And this goes back to what the founding fathers recognized, that the biggest threat to our freedom and well-being does not lie with a foreign regime. It doesn't lie with the Chinese government and TikTok. It doesn't lie with the Russian government or the Iranian government or the North Korean government. The biggest threat to our own freedom, privacy, our well-being, our prosperity lies right there with our own federal government.
Yeah, the thing is that this is nothing new. Maybe some of the viewers and listeners may recall that I guess it was in the late 1990s, there were these news stories about the Carnivore. Now, what the hell was Carnivore? Carnivore was this arrangement between the US, the British, the Australian, and the New Zealand governments to have the telecommunication devices and the shared and coordinated use of them to basically absorb all international telecommunications of any sort, telephones, videos, anything. And then to have what we now call AI, but which already was developing, is to be able to leave certain key words as search words, that if these words were caught in any conversation, in any communications anywhere, would then raise a red flag to be out of the millions upon millions of billions of pieces of everyday information, up, up, up. Let's look at that more closely. What were some of these words that were red flagged? Freedom, liberty, democracy. These were potentially viewed as terrorist words, you see, that had to be pursued. And this at first caused a scandal, like even the Washington Post or the Times, had a piece about, oh, that government's reach. But who even thinks about this anymore? You see, after a while, it becomes a taken for granted. People can't even think of, well, isn't that what government does? They're to take care of us. And this amount, the same way these FISA things. After 9/11, all of these things that shocked at it first the office and then the Department of Homeland Security and the special powers that will be there to be reading communications and be gathering information. And now it becomes standard fare. And to put on my, as you were suggesting, cynical economist hat for a moment, who also has an incentive to make these things never go away, these government surveillance intrusions and powers to never go away. The people in the agencies who are employed in doing them, whether it be the Pentagon, NSA, Department of Homeland Security, the FBI, the CIA, this is their rice bowls. If these programs were to be cut back or abolished, these people are out of a job. They lose their social service status. They lose their promotion opportunities. They see a threat to their retirement packages. They might actually have to earn an honest dollar in the private sector, producing or providing a service that people actually voluntarily are willing to pay for. I mean, you can't expect this of these people. You're asking a lot of a poor human being who lives at the trough of government as a state employee. Hornberger, you are so cruel and insensitive to your fellow man. But to be honest, this is a vested interest. We assume that why are there farm price support programs? Because there are farmers that lobby Washington to get paid for producing crops that we as customers are not willing to buy at a price that they'd like to have. We talk about subsidies for electric cars. We talk about protections for an industry or a large firm from their foreign competitors. And we see the connection between the person who gains at the expense of others in society by using government for corrupt special interest purposes. We need to think as well that those who man the government departments, bureaus, and agencies and are employed there and are working there full time and look upon it as a source of their rice bowl, their salary, their promotions, their retirement packages, their positions within the network of prestige and importance and significance. This is their life. And you're threatening to take that away. And they will do everything to rationalize, justify, and prove the necessity of both retaining those government departments, bureaus, and agencies, not reducing the manpower or the budgets, and in fact, always trying to look for new justifications to expand their powers, extend the employment in those departments, and assure that they will not be threatened with any type of their status in the system.
Well, I agree with you, and there's another factor involved in their effort to maintain that power, and that is the blackmail purpose of all this, either directly or just subtly by its very existence. Now, for example, if you remember J. Edgar Hoover, the former head of the FBI, he would gather secret information on members of Congress and other people within the government, and he'd have this secret trove of files with that information. And so if he ever needed something, he would approach that person and say, you know, we've come across this information, but I want you to know I'm protecting it so that nobody's going to find out about it. Well, it was a subtle form of blackmail. You come on board or we release it to the press. And one has to assume that that goes on in Congress. And that's how one of the ways they continue to get Congress, or at least some congressmen, to vote their way. And it doesn't even have to be overt. If you're convinced that the national security state is surveilling you and your telephone calls and so forth, then if you're having an extramarital affair or something, you just have to assume that they have that information. They don't even have to overtly threaten you with releasing it. You just say, yeah, whatever you want, I'll give it to you. And you rationalize it yourself in terms of national security. It's not, I'm going their way, not because they have this information, they might release it, but because I agree with them that national security is at stake, and you start rationalizing it to yourself. But even larger than that, Richard, the American people. You know, everybody's got secrets that they would rather not the world to know. But if you're convinced that the national security state has the ability to acquire these secrets, you tend to diminish your criticism of the national security state, especially if you're the CEO of a major corporation. Better to stay quiet than to have somebody release that you're involved in this extramarital affair or something. I mean, what's the upside to it? Might as well just stay quiet. And so that's a nice, subtle way to suppress dissent against a totalitarian-like regime. The people become self-censors. They say, I'm not going to take the chance of going out there and criticizing all this for fear that they're going to release my secrets to me that they've acquired through monitoring my telephone calls or my emails or my internet visits and so forth.
We certainly know that this is what is done in the private sector, where you have like mafia organizations that blackmail individuals to get them to pay money to keep a person's private affairs secret. Well, if we're shocked and disturbed and we find it morally wrong for some guy to threaten another person's life by blackmailing them to keep some, embarrassing bit of information a secret, why should we not assume that those in political power who have far more authority and legal ability to do the same thing to achieve their ends and purposes, not necessarily to get some person to cough up money in the literal cash bribe sense of blackmail, but to go along with government policies or not to challenge the government policies or to support the government policies. You just go along with what we want and you won't get into trouble. The US government does this internationally all the time. I was, many years ago, I was told by a person who at that time was an official in the Guatemalan government that if the Guatemalan government did not go along with the American policy of attempting to interdict drug smuggling from Latin America into the United States more actively than the Guatemalan government was doing at that time, then they were told, your free trade status is coming up for renewal in Washington very soon. Now, we're not saying that there's a connection between the two, but it certainly would make the passage of a continuation of your free trade deal with the United States less questionable or controversial if you were seen to be partnering more aggressively with us in our anti-drug campaign, in our activities in Latin America. Oh yeah, that's not arm twisting. Give me a break.
Yeah, well, they do the same thing with foreign aid. I remember there was some foreign regime some years ago, I forget which one, that voted against the U.S. and the United Nations on some particular thing that was important, Persian Gulf War or something like that. And I think it was the Secretary of State told the ambassador to that country, that's the most expensive vote you will ever make in your life, and which meant a termination of foreign aid. I mean, that's the way they operate.
Oh yeah.
We're about out of time, Richard, but I think it's also worth mentioning that, there's this notion that it's okay for these people in Washington to surveil foreigners. And the Fourth Amendment's clear. It refers to people, not just American citizens. And the Declaration of Independence is clear too, that every person is endowed with certain fundamental God-given rights, natural rights that pre-exist government. And I think we need to restore that conviction that foreigners have just as much a right of privacy as American citizens do. And that this notion that it's okay to spy on them and surveil them and so forth, and then connect them to Americans, I think is just despicable and a violation of our fundamental principles of this country of liberty and privacy.
I totally agree with you. Liberty has to be seen as something that is absolute in the securing of a person's life, liberty, and honestly acquired property, and that it is an ideal, a concept that transcends a national border, but is meant to be true and applicable to every human being, no matter where they are. Is that not the reason why we are shocked when there are, quote, human rights abuses in North Korea or China or Russia or Iran or? It's because we're deeply disturbed in an ethical sense, just as a human being, when we maybe just passingly hear this and watch this on the evening news, that this is how a human being is being mistreated by their government.
All right. On that eloquent note, we'll wrap things up. If you're new to FFF, come and visit us at fff.org and subscribe to our FFF Daily. Richard, as always, I greatly enjoyed the conversation. I look forward to talking to you next week.
Until next time.